there are a host of other parameters which are available. And I think we'll be doing great disservice to those scientists who have discovered these machines if we do not utilize all the parameters, or at least some of the major parameters. And it is my desire that at the end of the lecture you would be looking at most of the parameters which are given in the automated CBC report. These are some of the parameters, and every day there is new automation going on, and you are getting more and more parameters, and many of them are very useful clinically. So for those who wonder how is it that this machine is able to do all these and count all these parameters perfectly, all these automated cell counting machines are based on one of two principles. The first principle, which was devised by Coulter, the Coulter principle, is based on a very simple principle. On this you will find that electricity is flowing between two electrodes, and if the RBC, which does not conduct electricity, flows through this and impedes the flow of electricity, there is a resistance which is measured, and this resistance is picked up by the machine. The newer generation counter machines use the principle of optical light scattering, in which light falls on a single red blood cell, and based on the scatter of this light, depends on the various qualities of the red blood cell, not just red blood cell, of various blood cells. Based on the quality of the scatter, you can define what exactly is the cell, what is the type of cell, as I will illustrate subsequently. So this cartoon wonderfully illustrates the Coulter principle. So you have electricity which is flowing between the positive and the negative electrode. And as the RBC goes through this, for a moment there is a break in electricity. This break in electricity produces a resistance, and this resistance produces a pulse, which is also known as an oscillation. So the number of pulses depends on the number of cells. The height of the pulse depends on the size of the cell. This is the simple principle on which the Coulter principle is based. And based on this, then the computer graphically tells you the total number of cells and the total number of cells of various sizes. So this is known as a histogram, which is what this computer calculates based on the graph which is available for it. And when the counter first starts counting, in the first chamber, what is counted is the platelet and RBC together. The next chamber, you have the WBC, which is counted. Platelet and RBC are counted together, and any cell which has a size between 2 and 30 femtoliters is counted as a platelet. Any cell which has a size of more than 35 femtoliters is counted as a RBC. When it goes to the next chamber, the WBCs are counted. Before the WBCs are counted, this chamber, which contains platelet and RBCs, a solution is mixed in this which lyses the RBCs. RBCs are lysed and the rest of the cells are counted as WBCs. But in the first chamber, when the platelets and RBCs are counted together, and as I said, less than 30 femtoliter is counted by the machine as a platelet, more than 35 is counted as a RBC. In that chamber, WBC is also there. But if you look at the relative counts of RBC and WBC, RBC is in millions. So you have 5 million, 4.5 million, 5 million, 4 million, while normally WBC count is in thousands. So whatever count you get of RBC also includes the WBC count, but because it is a minuscule portion of the total count, it is not given any importance. What is 5,000 in comparison to 5 million? And hence it is not significant, hence it is not counted separately when you count a RBC count. Once the RBC has been counted by the machine, then the liquid is then lysing solution is now added to the liquid. This lysing solution lyses all the RBCs, and what is left is now you have WBCs. And any cell more than 35 femtoliter is counted as a WBC. In reality, if you look at the various sizes of various cells, the largest cell is the monocyte, the second largest cell is the neutrophil, and the smallest is the lymphocyte. But when it comes to the machine, the smallest is still counted as a lymphocyte, the largest is a monocyte, but the machine counts the largest cell, the cell which has more than 150 femtoliter, 150 femtoliter as the neutrophil, not as the monocyte, though in reality monocyte is the largest cell. That is because under the influence of the solution, the lysing solution, most of the cytoplasm is lost. So what in reality is counted is the size of the nucleus of the cell. And the nucleus of the neutrophil is the largest nucleus, and hence it is counted as the largest cell. So all cells which have a nuclei between 0 to 100 femtoliter is counted as a lymphocyte. Cells which are sized between 100 to 150 femtoliter, all three cells, that is monocytes, basophils and eosinophils, are counted as this group of cells. And more than 150 femtoliter is counted as a neutrophil. So one thing you have to understand is machines which rely solely on the Coulter principle, that is impedance of electrical current, can give you cells of three different sizes. Less than 100, which is taken as lymphocyte, more than 150, which is taken as a neutrophil. 100 to 150 is a combination of monocytes, basophils and eosinophils, which is not differentiated by this cell count. And based on these various cell sizes, you have the RBC and platelet histograms. As I already told you, cells with the size of less than 25 femtoliter is counted as a platelet. Cells which are size of more than 25 femtoliter is counted as a RBC, and WBC is not given any significance because it is very small in number. And this Coulter, based on these three sizes, WBC, RBC and platelets, now gives you a number of parameters. The RBC count, as is very easy to understand, is directly measured by the machine. Hemoglobin is also directly measured by the machine. The measurement of hemoglobin is not based on the Coulter principle. The RBCs are first lysed, and based on the change of color by a spectrophotometric analysis, you get the amount of hemoglobin. So that is a different principle that this machine uses to measure hemoglobin. And sizes, you have the WBC count and the platelet count. I told you a graph which is known as a histogram. Based on that graph, you have the mean corpuscular volume. So what is the mean size of these various cells, whether it is normocytic, microcytic or macrocytic, and red cell distribution width, that is how much the cells differ in sizes. Again, based on histograms, whether it is less than 100 femtoliter, more than 150 femtoliter, or more than between 100 to 150 femtoliters, you have percentages of various WBC subtypes. The other three parameters, hematocrit, mean corpuscular hemoglobin and mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration, are calculated by the machine, which will go into very shortly. So these are some of the important parameters which the WBC, the complete blood count, tells us. Hematocrit, normally in the pre-Coulter era, the automated hematology analyzer era, the hematocrit was measured by means of a centrifugation. So you take anticoagulated blood, you centrifuge it, what settles at the bottom that is the plasma. The buffy coat contains the WBC. At the bottom you have RBCs, at the top you have the plasma. The Coulter machine does not measure hematocrit, it calculates the hematocrit. Very easy to understand, it has measured mean corpuscular volume. Having measured mean corpuscular volume, having measured the total RBC count, the product of these two, RBC count into MCV, is equal to the hematocrit. This is how it calculates hematocrit. Mean corpuscular volume is measured by the machine, and based on that you have either microcytic anemia, the common types of microcytic anemia being iron deficiency anemia, thalassemia and anemia of chronic disease. If the MCV is more than normal, more than 80 or 85 or 90 based on various ages, you have macrocytic anemia. And many of us seem to think that macrocytic anemia is synonymous with megaloblastic anemia. Please understand there is a number of causes of non-megaloblastic macrocytic anemia. You have to think of liver disease, you have to think of reticulocytosis, and in adults alcohol consumption as an important cause of non-megaloblastic macrocytic anemia. The most worrying is normocytic anemia. Whenever you have a patient who has normocytic anemia, make sure you have ruled out chronic renal failure, aplastic anemia, anemia due to acute blood loss. The next parameter which is measured which is calculated by the machine, is the mean corpuscular hemoglobin. People often get confused between mean corpuscular hemoglobin and mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration. So please concentrate on these terms. Mean corpuscular hemoglobin means the average amount of hemoglobin in the RBC. So it depends on the hemoglobin content and the RBC count. It does not depend on the size of the RBC. So if you have total hemoglobin of 15 and RBC count of 5 million, you divide it and you'll get the amount of hemoglobin per RBC. This is the mean corpuscular hemoglobin. And from the formula, again, let me reiterate, it is very clear that it has nothing to do with the size of the RBC. And if the MCH is normal, we call it as normochromic. If it is less than normal, we call it as hypochromic. Mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration. That is the concentration of hemoglobin inside the RBC. Again, easy to understand because it is the amount of concentration of hemoglobin within the RBC. It depends on the RBC size. Normally, MCH and MCHC go together. But imagine a situation where the RBC size is small, as happens in spherocytosis. In spherocytosis, a part of the RBC membrane is lost, and hence the RBC is small in size. What you see as a small spherical RBC is in reality a RBC which is small in size. So this small RBC, the amount of hemoglobin which is there in the small RBC, even if it remains constant, the mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration will be increased because it is dependent on the size of the RBC. And hence, MCHC elevation is a very, very sensitive parameter to diagnose, to suspect and diagnose spherocytosis. Because in spherocytes, the RBC size in volume is much lower than normal. This is the one example where MCH and MCHC do not go together. So a normal MCH with an increased MCHC of more than 35 strongly suspect spherocytosis. What is red cell distribution width? Concentrate on the term for a moment. Red cell distribution width. It refers to the distribution of RBCs of various sizes. Anisocytosis means RBCs of various sizes. So red cell distribution width is nothing but a parameter of anisocytosis. Anisocytosis refers to size. Poikilocytosis refers to shape. When we say anisopoikilocytosis, we mean cells of various sizes and various shapes. RDW is a measure of anisocytosis. And one excellent example to know the importance of anisocytosis in RDW is thalassemia minor. In thalassemia minor, you have RBCs of same size, while in iron deficiency anemia, you have RBCs of various sizes. Some with a very low MCV, some with a slightly low MCV, so the cells are of various sizes. Hence, in patients with thalassemia, hemoglobin is low, MCV is low, but RDW is normal. While in patients with iron deficiency anemia, hemoglobin is low, MCV is low, but the RDW is increased. One important precaution to be taken here that this is not an infallible method to differentiate between the two. And many patients who have beta thalassemia minor can have mildly elevated RDW, but this is a rough screening test to know whether you are dealing with thalassemia minor or iron deficiency anemia, and then proceed with quantitative hemoglobin electrophoresis. The next parameter, which is now very easily defined by the newer generation automated cell analyzers, is the reticulocytes. Please remember, the analyzers which are based only on the Coulter principle, the size of the cell, you will not be able to know what is the reticulocyte percentage. This is shown in the newer generation machines. Now, if you look at the maturation of RBCs, you have erythroblasts, normoblasts, then you have reticulocytes, and then you have mature RBC. Erythroblasts and normoblasts have nuclei. When it comes to reticulocytes, these RBCs are devoid of nuclei, and RBCs, all of us know, have no nucleus. These reticulocytes, though they are devoid of nuclei, they still have RNA in the cytoplasm. This RNA stains blue. That is why you get polychromasia. Reticulocytes, because they are younger RBCs, they are larger in size. So if you have a situation where you have an elevated reticulocyte, normal reticulocyte percentage is 0.5 to 1.5%. And if you look only at the reticulocyte percentage, you will often erroneously diagnose hemolytic anemia. You have to be certain that this patient has an elevated absolute reticulocyte count. The normal RBC count is 5 million. Reticulocyte percentage is 0.5 to 1.5%. So the absolute reticulocyte count is 50,000 to 1,50,000. 0.5 into 5 million is equal to 50,000. 1.5 into 5 million is 1,50,000. So the normal absolute reticulocyte count is 50,000 to 1,50,000. Now imagine a situation where the patient has a hemoglobin of 4 gram percent and has a reticulocyte count of 5%. So for a moment you would think that this patient has reticulocytosis, but this patient in reality has a RBC count of only 1 million. So 1 million, and he has a reticulocyte count percentage of 5%. So you will realize that his absolute reticulocyte count is only 50,000 and he does not have reticulocytosis. So whenever you want to confirm reticulocytosis, calculate the absolute reticulocyte count, which is very easily done if you have the reticulocyte percentage and the RBC count, both parameters available in the newer generation machines. In the older generation machines, you will have only the RBC count. By and large, over the period of years, I have realized that histogram, which is usually but not always given with the complete blood count report, has a lot of significance. And it is my plea to all of you is you tell your pathologist that when they give you the complete blood count report, they should also give you the histogram. So ideally, in an ideal world, it is the pathologist who should look at the histogram and see what are the problems in the histogram and accordingly report on the peripheral smear. But most pathologists being overworked, they will not be looking at it very carefully. So look at the histogram and you will be able to make a number of diagnoses as I will illustrate now. A brief recap, any cell less than 25 femtoliter is counted by the machine as a platelet. Any cell more than 30 femtoliter is counted as a RBC. Now this 12-year-old child presented with pallor, easy fatigability, and had anemia, and there was a history of persistent diarrhea. But when we did the CBC, the hemoglobin was 7.7 gram percent, and I was certain that this patient would have microcytic anemia. Because of persistent diarrhea, I thought there should be an element of iron deficiency anemia. But the MCV was 88, and the report which was given by the pathologist was normocytic anemia, which is normocytic normochromic. So one of the first things they should consider in such a that there are two peaks. One peak is around 70 femtoliters, the other peak is around 95 femtoliters, about 100 femtoliters. So this patient had a combination of microcytic and macrocytic anemia. Because it is a combination of micro and macro, this machine calculated the mean of micro and macro and gave you a figure of 88. In reality, this patient did not have microcytic, did not have normocytic, had a dimorphic anemia, microcytic and macrocytic anemia. And the next thing that we did was to do a TTG, and a diagnosis of celiac disease was made. A wonderful example to show the importance of histogram. This 8-year-old girl presented with fever, exudative pharyngitis, and cervical lymphadenopathy. We kept a differential diagnosis of streptococcal pharyngitis versus infectious mononucleosis. CBC was sent, and the CBC showed that most of the RBCs had the MCV was around 85, which was normocytic, but there was another peak at around 180. Now, normally, it is impossible in normal physiology to have an MCV of 180. So even a small peak at 180 should make you wonder what is the problem. It is not dimorphic anemia, because even in megaloblastic anemia, you do not get such high MCVs. MCV 180 means some error is there, it is a fallacious reading. And what had happened was, this cell, this machine counts the RBC as it passes through that aperture. If these RBCs are agglutinated together, it will be counted like a single RBC, and the reading will be obtained as a large RBC and a large MCV. So this patient, the next thing that we did was to do a direct Coombs test. The direct Coombs test was positive, and this patient had cold agglutinin-induced hemolytic anemia. The cold agglutinin disease was because of infectious mononucleosis. Infectious mononucleosis and mycoplasma are two important causes of cold agglutinin disease. When you have cold agglutinin disease, there is spontaneous RBC agglutination on peripheral smear. This spontaneous RBC agglutination is picked up by the counter as a cell with a very large MCV. Excellent example to pick up a patient who has spontaneous RBC agglutination on peripheral smear and land up with an uncommon diagnosis of cold agglutinin disease. This patient was diagnosed with iron deficiency anemia, was on iron therapy. I'm sorry, this should be 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later, when we did a CBC, it showed another peak. This showed that this patient has reticulocytosis. Reticulocytes are large in size, and hence this slightly elevated MCV is because of reticulocytosis. And you know that this patient is responding to iron therapy. Now, this was a very interesting case who was referred to me for hospitalization. This patient had fever of 1 day duration. It was in the peak dengue season. Someone had got investigations done. The CBC showed a platelet count of 57,000. NS1 was negative, dengue IgM was positive, and the panic button was pressed, and I was asked to hospitalize the child. My first suspicion that something was amiss was because the platelets was 57,000 on day 1 of dengue. Normally, we would expect thrombocytopenia beyond day 3, day 4 of the illness. So I thought that there was something wrong. I looked at the CBC histogram, and what do you find? This platelet histogram shows you normally you will have platelets of predominantly one size. So you will have something like this, a platelet histogram. Here you have multiple peaks, and what has happened is many platelets have got clumped together to give you platelets of various sizes. They are not platelets of various sizes. Something like RBC agglutination, here you have platelet agglutination, and they have agglutinated in various sizes. This patient has what is known as induced pseudothrombocytopenia, not an uncommon entity. Hence, it is mandatory that any counter which gives you a report of thrombocytopenia, ideally, the pathologist should look at the smear to see whether the patient has really thrombocytopenia or it is pseudothrombocytopenia. Another simple way, if your pathologist has not taken the trouble, is to send another sample with heparin as an anticoagulant, and lo and behold, you will find that the platelet count is normal. So this patient was saved hospitalization just because I looked at the platelet histogram. This 6-year-old child had severe atopic dermatitis and came to me with thrombocytopenia. The child was 3 years old, and I immediately got very happy with myself. I thought I had diagnosed a rare condition, Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome. Did the CBC, and I found that most of these platelets were more than 10 femtoliters in size. Large platelets rules out Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome. It might be difficult even with the machine to be certain whether it is a small or a large platelet. But by and large, if you have platelets which are more than 10 femtoliters in size, you are dealing with immune thrombocytopenic purpura and not Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome. Just imagine, no doubt this diagnosis would have been made subsequently by other methods. But what a big relief. On the one hand, you have such a major disease like Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome. On the other hand, you have such a easily treatable and not a very worrisome disease like ITP. After RBC and platelet histograms, let us discuss WBC histogram. As I told you, the cells are first, the platelets and the RBCs are first counted. The cells are lysed so that the RBCs are lysed, and then whatever is remaining is counted as the WBC. And the older generation machines which rely only on the counter principle, in other words, rely only on the size of the cell, will be able to differentiate between 3 types of cells. Small cells, lymphocytes, large cells, neutrophils, medium-sized cells, which is a combination of monocytes, eosinophils and eosinophils. So this is an example of neutrophilia. So you have large size cells, small size cells in excess lymphocytosis, Medium-sized cells in excess could be either monocytosis or eosinophilia. And you will need the pathologist to look into the microscope and tell you whether it is monocytosis or eosinophilia. Now, this 12-year-old child was posted for appendectomy, and as a part of the routine pre-op investigation, a CBC was done, which showed a total leukocyte count of 3.5 million, TLC of 3.5 million. And if you look at the histogram, you will find that it begins and sharps. There is only huge and there is a sharp fall. This is because here the RBCs were not lysed at all. The machine normally automatically the solution is picked up by the machine and the RBCs are lysed. In this case, the container which contains this liquid, which is known as the stromatolizer, it was empty. So what this machine counted was the RBC count. RBC count which was in millions, and hence the total count of 3.5 million was given. In reality, the machine had counted the RBCs. We rechecked with the stromatolizer container being filled, and then we realized that the TLC was normal. This 2-year-old child presented with hepatosplenomegaly, a total count of 40,000, hemoglobin of 4 grams, and low platelets. Now, before looking at the PS, one of the first suspicions that will come to your mind is leukemia, because raised count, significant anemia, significant thrombocytopenia. You look at the cell histogram, and you'll find an initial peak in the WBC histogram. So WBC histogram relies on cells which are first lysed. The RBCs are lysed. What is not lysed are cells which contain nuclei. And if you have nucleated RBCs, these nucleated RBCs are not lysed. And this peak is because of nucleated RBCs. And this patient had a huge number of nucleated RBCs on peripheral smear, which is a characteristic feature of thalassemia major. So this patient's TLC was in reality about 15 to 20,000. The rest was nucleated RBCs. So then you have to have a corrected total WBC count. The pathologist has to count the nucleated RBCs, deduct it from the total leukocyte count, and give you the corrected TLC. But just looking at this figure, you will know that this patient has, in all likelihood, thalassemia major. Obviously, then confirmed by pathologists who will tell you that this patient has thalassemia major, and you will go ahead with hemoglobin electrophoresis. So I told you there are two major principles on which the whole business of automated hematology analysis is based. Sometime in the 1950s, Mr. Coulter came up with this principle, which is known as the Coulter principle, which I have already alluded to. So it is eponymously now known as the Coulter principle. The newer generation machines, which make life much easier for us, much easier for the pathologists also, are based on flow cytometry. The principle is very simple. When the light shines on a RBC, or any cell for that matter, shines on a blood cell, there would be forward scatter of the light and side scatter of the light. It is seen that the forward scatter of the light depends on the cell volume and size, while the side scatter depends on the internal complexity of the cell. What are the type of granules in the cell, what is the size of the nucleus, and what is the quality of the nucleus. So based on the forward scatter and the side scatter, the computer then calculates and tells you what are the various types of cells. So this is how the graph appears. So if you have highly granular cells on the x-axis, as you go along the x-axis, the most granular cells are on the right, the least granular cells are on the left. So highly granular cells are on the right side of the scattergram, and they are labeled as eosinophils. And that is why the newer machine will tell you exactly the eosinophil percentage also. While agranular cells, lymphocytes and monocytes are agranular cells, so they are shifted to the left. The cells which are largest are on the upper side of the scattergram. So you have lymphocytes, monocytes somewhere in between. Atypical lymphocytes, blast cells which are quite large, are there at the up end of the scattergram, while moderately granular, moderately sized cells are in the mid portion of the scattergram. This is the mid portion. You have moderately sized and neutrophils and basophils, moderately granular and moderately sized cells. These are somewhere here. While small cells, the smallest cells, are at the left lower end, they are non-granular also. The smallest at the left lower end, think of nucleated RBCs and clumps of platelets. So If the platelets have clumped together, the size will also be more than 35 femtoliters, and it will be picked up here. So left hand, at the left hand side, you will have RBCs, nucleated RBCs and platelet clumps. As I told you, lot of revolution is taking place in the field of automated hematology analyzers, and all that can be said can be summarized in one sentence, that it is still work in progress. And now as work continues briskly on this field, you will have new and new parameters coming up. As I told you, now nucleated RBCs are given by many of the newer cell counting machines. Another parameter which is given is what I would like to demonstrate here. This is a wonderful example of the parameter which was of such great usefulness for us. This 12-year-old girl, the known case of SLE, presented with acute kidney injury. CBC showed thrombocytopenia. Now in SLE, you know most patients with SLE have thrombocytopenia, and patients with SLE have kidney involvement on a large scale. So they develop kidney failure, but this patient had acute kidney injury. One look at the peripheral smear, if you were to look at the peripheral smear, and you will see that this patient had microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. This is a Burr cell. This is a helmet cell. These are all cystocytes. Cystocytes are defined as cells which are fragments of RBCs, which the fragments are
I think he has lost connection. Just bear for a few minutes. Yeah, he's working on the connection. Just
घर जाने में दिक्कत तो घर वहाँ जाना है मेरे को, लेकिन कब जाने की तय नहीं है। यहाँ पर है सर, वहाँ घर है तो दिक्कत है मेरे को, कोई दिक्कत है, घर भी नहीं रहा है यहाँ पे, वो सोच नहीं सोचते हैं। अब ये सोच रहा है बच्चा पहले से सोचता है, खाना पीना दिक्कत क्यों सोचना है। आपका कार्य प्रश्न आधार ही है, इन लोगों का रिलेटिव भी है।
yeah, Girish, I can see you.
Yes, just a second. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
An example, technology not being infallible, this was it. Lost connection because of Wi-Fi problems. Can you hear me clearly, sir?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Everything is clear?
Yeah.
So as I told you, so these cells, which are known as cystocytes, which help you clinch a diagnosis of microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. Only 3 differential diagnoses of microangiopathic hemolytic anemia: HUS, TTP, and DIC. So these are known as cystocytes. Cystocytes are RBC fragments which are seen on peripheral smear. Newer generation machines can even comment on cystocytes. Another parameter which is now coming up in a big way is the immature reticulocyte fraction. So I told you there are 2 principles on which cell counting is based. The second principle was flow cytometry. This is based on what is known as fluorescence flow cytometry. It is an advance over just plain flow cytometry. So reticulocytes contain RNA. This RNA is detected by RNA binding fluorescent dyes. So based on this, you will have 3 types of reticulocytes. One which has high fluorescence, then you have reticulocytes with medium fluorescence and reticulocytes with low fluorescence. The younger the reticulocyte, the higher is the fluorescence. So immature reticulocyte fraction is a combination of high fluorescent reticulocytes and medium fluorescent reticulocytes. Now, what is the advantage of immature reticulocyte fraction? By and large, not of great importance, because both reticulocyte count and immature reticulocyte fraction both give you an idea of accelerated erythropoiesis, which is seen in patients with hemolytic anemia. But reticulocyte count also depends on effective erythropoiesis. To give you an example, if you have a patient who has hemolytic anemia, but in addition has iron deficiency anemia or vitamin B12 deficiency, despite the fact he has got hemolysis, reticulocyte count may not increase much because erythropoiesis is not effective. In this situation, an immature reticulocyte fraction will confirm that this patient has hemolysis because it is a parameter of not just effective, it is a parameter of accelerated erythropoiesis. So a situation where reticulocyte count is low, but you have normal or increased immature reticulocyte fraction is seen especially in patients with iron deficiency anemia and megaloblastic anemia. The next parameter is the content of hemoglobin in the reticulocyte. So it is analogous to the mean corpuscular hemoglobin. What you are dealing with here is mean reticulocyte hemoglobin. And what is the advantage of this parameter? In clinical practice, there is one situation which is often difficult to differentiate. You have patients of iron deficiency anemia where the RBCs are microcytic and hypochromic. Patients with anemia of chronic disease, for example, patients with celiac disease or any other inflammatory disease like systemic onset JIA or even inflammatory bowel disease, usually they have microcytic hypochromic anemia. Occasionally they can have normocytic normochromic anemia. If they have microcytic hypochromic anemia, you are always in a fix. Am I dealing with IDA or am I dealing with anemia of chronic disease? So the next test that you do is a ferritin level. If the ferritin level is low, you are dealing with IDA. If the ferritin level is high, you are dealing with anemia of chronic disease. Now the confounding thing here is, imagine a patient who has got anemia of IDA, he has got IDA, but in addition, he has got inflammation. So he has a combination of both. He has got iron deficiency anemia plus anemia of chronic disease. This is a very important, difficult problem. Again, a simple example will illustrate this. If he has got inflammatory bowel disease, because of loss of blood in the gut, he will have iron deficiency anemia. Because of inflammation, he will have anemia of chronic disease. So if you want to know whether this patient has only iron deficiency anemia, only anemia of chronic disease, or a combination of anemia of chronic disease and anemia, one important parameter is CHR. If it is less than 26 picogram per cell, whether the patient has ACD or IDA, one thing is certain, this patient definitely has iron deficiency. So even if the ferritin is very high in this setting, you will still give the patient iron. The novel hematology parameters as far as WBCs are concerned is immature granulocyte. And in the photograph that I showed you of flow cytometry, the largest cells which are very granular, which are at the top, are the immature granulocytes. All these newer analyzer machines can tell you an immature granulocyte. For all of us who have worked in neonatology, one of the major problems is when it comes to septic screen, we rely on CRP. And many of us erroneously rely on thrombocytopenia, when in reality it is not a parameter of sepsis at all. We rely only on CRP. We all know that the most sensitive parameter for sepsis in newborn is the IT ratio, immature to total granulocyte ratio. Unfortunately, most of the pathologists will not give you an IT ratio because it needs a lot of time to look under the microscope. Now, this problem can be solved by these newer hematology analyzer machines, which will give you an exact IT ratio, which will help you diagnose whether probably this patient has sepsis. Also, atypical lymphocytes and blasts, and difference between atypical lymphocytes and blasts is also possible with these newer parameters. So, situation where you have infectious mononucleosis, where you have atypical lymphocytes, and even the pathologist is not certain whether it's an atypical lymphocyte or blast. These cells with a fair degree of certainty will tell you it is atypical lymphocyte and not a blast based on the site scatter. The newer platelet parameters, there is something known as platelet crit, just like hematocrit. One thing that you have to remember about platelet crit is it remains, usually in most disease states, platelet crit remains constant. That is because when the platelet count goes down, there is accelerated megakaryopoiesis. And the young platelets, the immature platelets are large in size. So when the platelet count goes down, the MPV goes up, and hence the product is usually constant. So if you have a situation where you have thrombocytopenia with a low platelet crit, you are dealing with a situation which is not at all, which is rather ominous, because here you have a situation where megakaryopoiesis is defective. An excellent example would be aplastic anemia or acute leukemia, where you have thrombocytopenia, but the platelet count, platelet size will be small. So low platelet crit in the setting of thrombocytopenia to get you worried. Then you have, if you have mean platelet volume. If you have a small platelet size, you suspect Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome. If you have a large platelet size, you suspect ITP. But in certain settings, especially if it is very large, you suspect Bernard-Soulier and some of the inherited macrothrombocytopenias. Another new parameter which has come up is the reticulated platelets, which is analogous to reticulocytes. Reticulocytes are reticulated RBCs. Reticulated platelets are analogous to the reticulocytes. So this tells you the immature platelet fraction. And again, in the setting of thrombocytopenia, if you are in doubt whether I should give platelet transfusion to this patient who has got a very low platelet count, if you have a high immature platelet fraction, you know that this patient is on the road to recovery. Probably you need not give a platelet transfusion. So to summarize what I have told you, when it comes to indices, look at all the indices. Please don't forget to look at the red cell distribution width. Do not forget to look at the histogram. It will give you a lot of clues to what the machine has told you. And some of the erroneous things that the counter will tell you will be picked up on histogram reading. When you look at the reticulocyte count, you must calculate it. Calculate the absolute reticulocyte count to know whether you are dealing with hemolytic anemia or not. If there is isolated thrombocytopenia, look at MPV and the platelet crit. And if possible, forget nothing, remember everything. And if it is still not possible, go over this lecture, which will be available in video format. Thank you very much. I'm ready to take any questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Girish. The chat box is full with praises for your talk. Everybody is very appreciative of the talk given by you. And believe me, this is one of the wonderful talks on CBC I have heard in a long time. So really congratulations to you.
Thank you.
There was a question on a combination of sickle cell disease and iron deficiency anemia. How would the Coulter or the scatter machine would help us?
Just listening to this talk, they can guide us, but I don't think I have any idea about this. I would suspect if the patient has SS pattern, if he doesn't have S beta thal, if he has pure SS pattern, then if you have microcytosis, you can suspect that in addition to sickle cell anemia, he has got iron deficiency anemia. Normally, I would expect normocytic anemia and sickle cell disease, unless he has got sickle beta thal. If he has microcytosis, I would suspect iron deficiency in addition to sickle cell anemia, which is a big problem. Iron deficiency in sickle cell is an important problem.
And as you mentioned, like thalassemia major, sometimes they have nucleated RBCs and the count, we have seen TLC going very high spuriously, like thalassemia major.
Yes. Sorry, was that a question or a comment?
Comment, I mean, you could have
Yes.
nucleated RBC and it could be counted as WBC, so you can have
Yes, yes.
a leukocytosis
Very
like,
high TLC.
yeah,
Very high TLC.
right. This we have come across on many occasions in sickle cell disease as well. Girish, you made a very right mention about a small RBC and increased MCHC. Can we
Yes.
draw an analog and say that a large RBC and increased MCHC is suggestive of autoimmune hemolytic anemia?
Large RBC.
I mean, MCV larger, which is
Uh,
agglutinated RBC, is curiously counted as a very large RBC. I have found it very useful in practice that if there is
Yes,
a
sir.
yeah, so
Yes.
large MCV and increased MCHC, this combination is very
MCHC.
suggestive of AIHA.
But it is suggestive of only one type of AIHA, and that will be cold agglutinin disease, because
Yeah.
spontaneous RBC agglutination takes place only in cold agglutinin disease.
Yeah,
But the other parameter would be true for all autoimmune hemolytic anemias, because autoimmune hemolytic anemia oftentimes have spherocytosis, and that is why you have this type of picture.
yeah,
Elevated MCHC. Elevated MCHC is because of spherocytosis in autoimmune hemolytic anemia.
right. And then because of agglutination, as you said, with cold agglutination, you could get
Yes.
very high MCV.
Markedly elevated MCV.
Yes.
Markedly elevated MCV is a big clue to suspect cold agglutinin disease.
Yeah, I remember one hematologist saying that if you have an MCV which is going beyond 150, always think of an autoimmune hemolytic anemia.
Absolutely.
Girish, this immature platelet fraction and immature reticulocyte fraction, so they will, means like especially immature reticulocyte, will it precede the rise of a reticulocyte count on treatment? So means is it a question of timing that when I'm treating first the IRF will get better and then the reticulocyte count?
Probably yes, sir. I'm not much aware of this, but logically, intuitively speaking, the IRF would increase first, and then the reticulocyte fraction, and will increase even if the patient has concomitant iron and B12 deficiency.
I don't know what is your experience, Girish, but in large proportion of patients, when there is thrombocytopenia, the machine does not give MPV. I have seen it a number of times.
So I have discussed this with many pathologists and hematologists, and they have said if there is thrombocytopenia, MPV is not reliable.
Not reliable.
MPV is not reliable. Significant thrombocytopenia, you're talking of MPV, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, MPV is not reliable if there is significant thrombocytopenia. So many times you have struggled whether it is ITP or Wiskott-Aldrich.
Yeah,
so
really.
You would think that Wiskott-Aldrich is a very easy diagnosis. You have got microthrombocytes, but it is very difficult to differentiate between the two.
Yeah. And similarly, ITP versus aplastic anemia, where we wish to see the MPV. I mean, if there is thrombocytopenia, the MPV is really blank in most of the reports.
Yes. Any other questions that I can see on the chat box? The questions chat box में
Dr. Girish,
Yes.
I wanted to ask how to differentiate IDA with thal minor in that case with an
Idea with thal minor, one parameter is the RDW. If RDW is increased, suspect iron deficiency anemia. And if it is normal, you suspect beta thalassemia minor. But if you have a combination of both, it is very difficult to diagnose.
And similarly,
Okay,
you
thank
could
you.
calculate the Menzer index as well.
That is one thing. But
Yeah,
again,
thank
these are not very infallible methods.
Right. Absolutely, yes.
Yes. One simple hemoglobin, quantitative hemoglobin electrophoresis with A2, though it is said that iron deficiency anemia, concomitant iron deficiency A2 is can normalize in thalassemia minor, but usually it is not so.
Yes.
What I have read is, unless the patient has very severe iron deficiency anemia, A2 will be elevated in patients of thalassemia minor, even if there is concomitant iron deficiency.
I mean, that is true. I've gone through this subject, and though it is mentioned that the A2 will be lower, but it never is lower to the extent that it will interfere with the diagnosis. So it remains the gold standard.
I thought here it's the other way around that we should remember. So, if a patient tells us that does my child have thyroid, and we have suppose asked for a electrophoresis, because as Girish said, IEW and Menzer's are not infallible. So if you ask for a electrophoresis and if your A2 is not more than the thyroid number, but you have iron deficiency, then don't comment that he is normal. First correct the iron deficiency and then repeat electrophoresis and then comment that he doesn't have a thyroid.
Yes, that is the right thing.
But
That is to be certain, but by and large, it is not normalized. That is what Dr. Savar was trying to say.
yeah. It does affect the A2 level, but not to the extent that it will interfere with the diagnosis.
I mean, that's absolutely accepted. It's just that I have also seen one or two cases where after correcting iron deficiency, it did rise beyond 3.5 and was labeled as thyroid. So therefore, we need to pull the other way around. That's the only thing.
Right. Any other question, comment, experience sharing? We have no limitation or restraint of time. You could go ahead, unmute yourself, voice your opinion. Most welcome to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Giri, for an excellent talk, nicely explained talk.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I am
Dr.
recording
Khurana has
this.
asked a question. I have no answer. What is HEMAQ for hemoglobin estimation? I am not aware, sir.
What is?
Dr. Khurana?
We very well know that IDA, I mean to say, is a very important problem, and
Yes.
for that, I mean to say that nowadays for community diagnosis, there HEMAQ instruments are there. So these HEMAQ instruments, with just one prick, they do their hemoglobin estimation. There are cartridges available, and a very accurate assessment of hemoglobin is done in community. Suppose you want to do for the in schools for the girl child, thousands of, so that is a very good method by using HEMAQs.
I mean, it will diagnose anemia or it will diagnose iron deficiency anemia?
No, it is an estimation. First of all, there are several types of instruments.
Okay.
The basic HEMAQ will diagnose hemoglobin level, only hemoglobin level.
Right.
And there are upgraded versions also in which you can diagnose, I mean to say, besides hemoglobin, other parameters also. So for a mass diagnosis and mass hematology, I mean to say, these are very, very useful instruments and have been used. There are ample number of evidences and studies of its utility throughout the world.
I think based on the principle that any hemoglobin less than 11 in Indian setting is iron deficiency unless proved otherwise.
No, it is not, it will give you the actual hemoglobin. It will give you the actual hemoglobin. Whatever is the hemoglobin level, it will give you the actual hemoglobin. And one can preserve the data also. One can connect to the laptop and all those things. One can preserve the data so that I would say we all know that a low hemoglobin in a girl child is the predominant cause of LBW babies. So जब तक इसको ठीक नहीं करेंगे अगला जनरेशन ठीक नहीं होगा. तो दैट इज द कॉन्सेप्ट.
Someone has asked this question, should we do reticulocyte count with CBC? My answer is yes. You should always be doing a reticulocyte count with WBC. And the newer machines give you an exact percentage.
So once again, Girish, thanks for
There are 2-3 questions repeatedly on Menzer for THAL. What is the utility?
Rajesh sir, ये आप बताइए. I don't rely on this.
I think we should take both Menzer and RDW as screening tests and not the, I mean, obviously not diagnostic.
And I think it stands to reason to have a confirmatory test when you're going to give a level to a child. So that would be, as you said very rightly, would be a screening test. When it comes to leveling a child as THEL minor, I think you have to rely on electrophoresis. There is no shortcut. Okay then, Girish, thanks a lot again from all of us for a wonderful talk. Really enjoyed the talk very much. Thank you everyone for joining. Thanks a lot. I'll end the meeting here.
Thank you, Girish. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.